first topic that we're going to get into, and we're honored to have back with the Jefferson County Safety and Faith Summit, Tina Rowe. Tina Rowe was with the Denver Police Department, while there, she moved through the ranks from officer to sergeant to lieutenant and captain. And as a captain, she was a commander of the Police Academy, Internal Affairs, and Patrol District 2. Following her retirement in 1993, I don't know how you did that, Tina. We're the same age.
You just look older.
I'm quite a bit older. I was being nice to me. She was confirmed by the United States Senate to be the United States Marshal for Colorado, and as such, she was responsible for coordinating security for the Oklahoma City bombing trials, as well as other trials requiring extensive security planning. Now, Tina provides training, presentations, and consulting to law enforcement agencies and private sector groups nationwide. Her topics include leadership, command, managerial, and supervisory effectiveness, patrolling strategies, emergency planning, and professional development. Tina has also given away many thousands of copies of her free church safety and security materials to places of worship all around the world since 2007. She teaches 1 and 2 classes a day on whole church safety and security. In 2015, Tina helped us launch our first Safety and Faith Summit by serving as the inaugural speaker. And we're honored to have her back. Today she's going to talk about the 5 crucial questions for safety and faith. Please welcome to the podium retired U.S. Marshal Tina Rowe.
Got it. No, I'm just fine, thanks. Oh, thank you. Hey, how many of you all find yourself, as I do, this is about the first time I have been in a group this size. I realize you maybe go to church and so forth, but as far as like just a conference or a gathering or something, is this kind of like the first time for some of you all to get together in a large group like this? It is for me. And then this last year, we had, of course, my business kind of stopped when we had COVID issues. And then a year ago, I fell down some stairs on my birthday and broke my leg and my ankle and my foot and 3 toes. So this leg is causing me some problems. So whatever faith you have, just pray in that one for me. And I'll hope that one of them works, and we'll get this all straightened out. I have to tell you, I walked in here, I'm just looking here immediately. What church are you all with?
Right here.
Uh-huh. Center. You all look more thuggish than most of the people we throw out of churches. Now, I'm a little concerned. In fact, this entire table doesn't look all that good when I look back to it. They asked me to tell you that you can hear better on this side than if you're on this side because there's some fans back there. So if you all want to move over, don't hesitate to do that. Just kind of scoot over. It's not a good group of people, but doggone it, you'll be able to hear better. So I do want to mention that to you because it is hard to hear over on that side of the room, and there's spots over here. So maybe at the break time you'd like to move over and do the rest of it that way. I wanted us to talk today about a variety of things, but I also wanted to, some of you have met me before, so I always toss up some photographs of myself. But this was back when this leg was not broken, as you can see. But that was back when I started in law enforcement. There's some people here that remember that time frame. I had a cross-draw holster, and for those of you all in uniform, I could tell you that when we said we were going to, this shows you something about human nature. We said we were going to go from a cross-draw holster to our, strong arm side, and everybody almost said they were going to quit because that just couldn't be safe to do that. And so I have decided in my lifetime that pretty much whatever we're doing, we don't want to be told we have to do something else. It doesn't matter what it is. But that was me. Now, that was the skirt I wore back then. And so I often tell young officers, don't be telling me it's too cold or it's too hot or it's too whatever. Try wearing a little short skirt and high heels and try and do police work that way, and you will get a whole different view of what is difficult to do. But I know in a class like this, we're going to have some, Baptists and some Methodists. And any Baptists in here? Methodists and stuff. So I felt like they might be offended, so I just kind of lowered my skirt a little bit. Felt like that was kind of, But now here's the issue. Do we have any apostolic, Pentecostal, Church of God, Church of the Nazarene, any of those here? Now, why aren't they here? We need to get them here. Oh, there you are. What church are you part of, sir? Oh, okay. Well, okay. I didn't want to offend anybody, so I thought, yeah. So sorry. I could tell you were upset at the time. So. Now, times change, don't they? I'm looking, and we are, I can't see everybody. There's some people back there on the booths that are younger, but this group looks like a pretty mature group of people. And so it's a reminder to us that times do change, don't they? But some things stay exactly the same. And one of the things that I enjoy doing is looking at old newspapers. When I say old, I mean into the 1800s and early 1900s and on. I read lots of old newspapers. And there are some things that happened back then that you could just go ahead and change and put today's date on, and it would be exactly the same. And somebody told me one time, they said, well, Tina, to hear you tell it, there's just evil in everything. I said, there is evil, potentially, in everything. That's why we have our places of worship, and it's why we have our faith, is because there's always the potential for that component. And so I wanted us to be thinking about that some today. But I also wanted us to remind us of this. This was the day that I retired, since the sheriff was talking about from the police department. This was when I retired from the marshal service. And look at that. You will be missed. Happy trails. And so that was just very nice, and a few tears were shed. And one of the supervisors came up to me and he said, Marshal Rowe, I just want you to know we're really going to miss you. You've added so much here and to my career. Can I have your chair? His name was Ken. And I said, Ken, what? He said, well, you've got a good chair, and I've got that old beat-up one, and nobody would know. I could just get up and I could swap, because the next guy, he could get a new chair anyway. I said, go take my chair, Ken, and if it will make you happy, take anything off the wall you want to. I should not have said that, because pretty much everything was gone after that. But it's a reminder to us that no matter how valuable we are right now, we'll be gone one day. All of us here will be gone one day. And the best thing that we can do is take the time that we have and develop things that are worthwhile. And if they've already been developed, make sure they stay strong and add to them all the time. And they may never give you personally the credit for it, but you will know that it happened. And one day there'll be this legacy that will keep building. And that's just the best that we can do in a limited amount of time in our lives. And I like for us to keep that focus. It's not just for us right now, it's for down the line. And I wanted to remind you of something about that as well, is that how many of you all have met obstacles in your efforts to do church safety and security? Some part of that, and I'm just going to say, some part of that is that some people get overzealous. Have you met some people that are a little bit overzealous about the safety and security function to the point where they turn people off about it? And that can be sometimes. But a lot of that is just resistance and sometimes jealousy, because if it's not their idea, then they don't want it to be anybody's idea. And some of it is just, we just like things the way they've been, and we don't think they're going to ever get any worse. But one of our biggest challenges, I think, when we're dealing with all of this, for each of us, is to say, we don't have to achieve it overnight. I mean, it's not like if they don't let us do everything we want right now, we can't do anything. Let's just do what we can do. And sometimes by doing that, people become more accepting. I go in a lot of churches where these church security people will tell me I get no support, and they laugh at me. And I'm sort of treated like the crazy guy in the church. Well, you know what I mean. You would understand that. So I want us to just kind of keep the faith about things like that. I want you to think about the big picture, though, and I'm so glad the sheriff said that. And this has been my challenge. When I started doing church security training, really focused on it, it was in 2007, you know, right after the events of the New Life Church in Colorado Springs and so forth. And pretty much nobody wanted me to talk about anything except an active shooter. And I would try to talk about the bigger picture, and they'd say, yeah, but what about active shooters? No matter what I would ever say, that's what they would come back to. And in fact, there was another group of people that still do a lot of training, and I think they do admirable training. But they even referred to me in one of their training. They said the problem with people like Tina Rowe is she wants to get off on all this other stuff, but we need to focus on active shooters. Well, the truth is that it's the big picture. I am very concerned. I hear somebody's phone, and I just want you to know, don't worry about that. If your phone goes off, just turn it off. I think it's rude and insensitive, but hey, you know, I'm a loving kind of person, so I'll just tolerate it. But seriously, if your phone goes off, don't let that be some horrible thing for you. Just turn it off and don't worry about it. I worry about a home invasion because that's the worst thing that can happen to a person in their home. A home invasion, and I live in Aurora, so I ought to worry. I'm always concerned about that. I tell my family about that. I go to their home, they're all out in the backyard, and the front door is open. And I just am on them about that all the time. But the truth is, when you look at you and your family, there's a lot more to be concerned about than a home invasion. I mean, there is that concern, but there's other concerns as well. And wouldn't we think it was foolish if somebody told us all this stuff that they do to make sure nobody can get into their house, and then they haven't done anything about fire safety, and they don't care about their travel safety, and they don't worry at all about their computer, they don't think about their children, and they don't think about their health. We would think that was just nuts. And I feel the same way about church safety and security. This is our whole church. We do have main worship services, and we have big events and all of that, but there is so much that we are involved with our whole church. Now, I see somebody has their cameras up, you know, to take a picture of that, and that's fine. You can do that. I think that's rude too, but don't worry about it. But no, go ahead and take a picture if you want to. But when this is all over with, they're going to provide you, might not be like today, but down the line, because they've already told the speakers this, with PDF or with copies of all the slides. So you will be getting those anyway, and that's why I didn't make handouts for you, because I'm just going to go through it, and then later you'll get the slides. And I'm sure that's what everybody else is doing as well. There are so many things in your church, and sometimes if you ever want to test yourself, look at your church calendar and see how often people are just in and out and in and out and in and out. You just, you know, almost never know. And then people you don't even know were in and out because they're dropping things off and picking things up. So I want us to be thinking about this whole church thing. And I always call it this. It's the 5 Ps. I just use this as a way to structure it for myself. It's the people. We're concerned about the people and the places and the property and the programs and the processes. Every one of those is equally important to see to it that our church, our place of worship, I say church, and I realize we don't perhaps worship in a place that we might just call a church, but in our church, those are the things that keep it going. And if any one of those gets shaky or unsafe or insecure, we have problems. And so I want us to be focused on those things as well. So here's the 5 crucial questions that we're going to just mention briefly. And here's what I'm going to do. We're going to mention them briefly. I've got a couple of things I'm going to say after that. And then we're going to stop, and I'm going to toss out a situation to a table. You know, just like groups of tables here, you know, no big thing. And if you get a chance, I want you to just kind of discuss with yourselves the answer to some of these questions, especially the first one. Because here's the first one. What could go wrong? That is the first question to ask about everything in our lives. What could go wrong? It would apply to when you decide to repair something at home, when you decide to get up on a ladder, when you are driving on a trip, when you've got somebody over for a guest, when you are at church. And in church, all the people, processes, programs, places, and property and programs that we're going to be dealing with, what could go wrong? We mentioned about the Oklahoma City bombing trials. And I only say that because isn't it ironic that I go to a lot of classes where the people in the classes weren't born then? Or they were just little kids then, so they don't remember anything about that at all. But during that trial, which was an important trial, it was considered the most important trial we had ever had in the United States as far as a federal trial goes. That was our guiding question every day about everything we did was, what could go wrong? And one of the deputies, and you know how this goes, if you're not the one responsible, it's easy to sort of shrug things off. And so one of the deputies said, well, we could do this what could go wrong forever. I said, that may be, so we'll just come up with answers forever. Is we're not going to cut corners because, well, you think that's a little excessive. Every time we have a concern. Now, Judge Maitch, who was the trial judge, he's passed away now. But I told him when it was done, he said, do you, and he wasn't the kind of guy that had friendly little conversations with you anyway. But he did have a friendly conversation with me afterwards, and he was thanking me for how things went. And there was certainly this whole team that made it all happen. And he said, was there anything that you would say you would do different? And I said, well, not different, but I don't mind telling you, I was a little disappointed. We had a whole plan for what we'd do if you had a heart attack in the bench, and you never did. So here we were every day with a plan for what we'd do if he'd keel over. And every day I'd think, maybe today's the day. But nope, never happened. And that's the thing about emergency plans. You will have 100 of them that you never use if you're lucky. And then something will happen and you'll say, I'll be doggone. I've got just the tool I need. Those of you all that work around the house, you know how nice it is to say, I've got just the tool I need. And that's what emergency plans are. Or just plans, not even emergency plans. That's what they are. They're just tools for us. So what could go wrong? What will prevent or reduce the harm if something goes wrong? And you know, as I just said this to you, I think there's another question we ought to stick in here, and I'm going to give it to you in just a little bit. I just thought it when I put that up. I thought, what the heck would I leave that out for? What could go wrong? What will prevent or reduce the harm if it does go wrong? Who will be responsible for what actions if something is going wrong? Who is it that's going to do this, and then who'll do this, and who'll do this? There is nothing worse than everybody calling 911 and nobody taking immediate action to solve a problem. So we want to know who's going to be doing what things. And then how will everyone know what to do? Are we going to put it in writing, or are we going to just casually talk to them? And that's okay too. Are we going to have some sort of training about it? Is this going to be something where before every event we'll just assign people? So how will everyone know what to do? And what will we do if it goes wrong anyway? Then what are we going to do? But I'm frustrated with myself because I would have added something else. Right after what could go wrong, if you're taking notes, write this in. And how will we know it's gone wrong? Are there some things that could be going wrong in our church that we don't know right away? Like what? Give me an example of something that you say, oh my gosh, who would have known that was going on? I'm sorry, what, sir?
Predator of the kids' ministry.
Yeah, a problem with the kids' ministry? Is that what you said?
Predator.
Oh, predator. I'm sorry. I was having trouble hearing that. A predator in the children's ministry. Yeah, you don't always know that right away, do you? What about embezzlement? That's one of the most common crimes in churches is embezzlement. And yet we don't usually catch on to it for a couple of years down the line. And so one of the questions about what could go wrong is, how will we know it's gone wrong? Well, we know that with some things. How will we know there's a fire in this area? We've got a smoke alarm. How will we know we've got problems with our money? We audit it regularly, and we have witnesses about taking up the money. And how will we know, so we'll save that one, how will we know about predators in our youth ministry? If you ever want to get just shocked, when I do the bigger classes, I have just scads of newspaper clippings and stuff about that very thing, and I swear, I don't like to be the person that never trusts anybody, but you show me somebody that is so intent upon being in the youth ministry all the time, and I think we need to kind of make sure that we're keeping an eye on that. And we need to always be aware of those kinds of issues. And I'm going to take the time to tell you this in about 3 minutes, just because I think it illustrates that point. I was speaking to a church here in Denver, as a matter of fact, or in the Denver metro area about, so now it's been 6 or so years ago. And they introduced me to an older guy who was in charge of their youth program. And he said, you know, my wife passed away, and this has just been a lifesaver for me because I just love these kids. And while we were talking to him, a young girl came running up, and she said, oh, Brother Bill, can I ride in your Corvette? And he said, I've got a couple of old cars, and they love to ride in them. He said, sure, is it okay with your mom? She said, okay. So they got in the car, and they drove off. And I said to the lady I was talking to, I said, you know, you shouldn't be doing that. Shouldn't be doing that. She said, oh, he just drives a few blocks and turns around and comes back. And I said, a lot of things can happen in a few blocks, but more to the point, it leads her to believe that she can get in the car with people and go for a drive, because after all, she's done it here with Brother Bill. So I said, it just doesn't look good. That's just not a good thing. When they came back, she hugged him really big and all of that. So I guess that stuck with the lady, and so she said she started noticing that he was giving 6 and 8 girls every single time after church rides, and sometimes they'd come back with a Coke and one thing another, and they'd always hug and hug and hug. And so she finally just said to him, I think it would be better if you don't do that. And he said, well, if you don't want me to do that, I'm quitting the program. So he did. So where was his heart really in that? Wasn't working with youth, it was finding his own youth again. And so I noticed that they've replaced him with a couple, really, which I think probably works well. But I worry all the time about youth ministries, not just because, although that's enough, not just because of the potential criminal activity or whatever, but of the loss of faith that people have in us when they read that in the newspaper. And the loss of faith for the young people that were impacted when they say, well, I thought I was safe here. So there's just so much. I think we owe it to our communities to be as above reproach as we can possibly be. So when they look at us, they say, this is the kind of life that I want to live, is the kind of life that is lived in this church. And so I'm very focused on that all the time. So what could go wrong, and how will we know it went wrong? How soon can we find out? And then the other questions are, what will prevent or reduce the harm? Who will be responsible for what actions? How will everybody know what to do? And what will we do if it goes wrong anyway? So here's how we find the answers. Outline the activity in detail and with specifics. Like this one today, I know that we knew a lot of potential for what we needed to take care of here. And so that was all worked into things. I always urge people to make sure they see there's an exit here and there's an exit here. And they could probably, there's some exits back there and an exit over there. So if something goes awry, we know how to get out of the place. And when Sheriff Schrader was speaking, I noticed many people took those exits. And I thought that was really good, Sheriff, that they were able to just get out right away. But we want to know what this activity is. And even if we feel stupid doing it, be willing to feel a little foolish. Even if we know, outline the activity with specifics. And be reasonable about things. You know, no, I don't think some animal's going to escape and come in here. But also be open to potentials. And then get input from those involved and also from those with differing perspectives. The thing I have found is that the people who actually benefit the most from the safety and security planning that you and your team or you and your family or you and your friends or whatever you and other members might be doing are often the ones that resist it the most, because they feel like it's encroaching on their activities. And that's why it's so important that they are part of that, because they know how the activity works. But we also need another perspective, because it's too easy to get into a rut with the way we're doing things. So outline the activity, be reasonable, get input from people involved. And then assign action roles based on capabilities and willingness for a lot of things. For example, this is a big thing of mine, is we worry so much about when the security team is there. We have a lot of plans for security teams, and I realize not all of you all are in teams and all that, but I'm just saying, if you are, we have a lot of plans for that most of the time. But what about Thursday night at the baby shower? And Saturday morning when people are there to fix up the church for Sunday? And what about the pizza party that the teenagers are going to have? And what about the Bible study that they're having on Tuesday afternoon? There's not security team people there. We're not doing some formal kind of something where we're planning. Well, shouldn't somebody feel like they have a security role? And so I think of that as just sort of a liaison role, a security liaison role, where we don't have people get a key to the building or get a key to a classroom or put their name on the calendar, whatever the case might be. That doesn't happen unless they get given a piece of paper about how to get help if they have this, how to get help if the water heater has burst and there's water all over. How to get help if they've got this situation. How we lock things up while we're in there so that people can't come in. And who's the last person that's going to lock up before we leave and make sure everything's okay. Those are very basic things, and they don't require great skill. But they do require that somebody is responsible for it. And so I think it's a valuable thing for us to start looking at every single activity that takes place when there are no security, quote, people around, and when we don't think of it as a big event of some kind, it's just in and out and doing the things that we do all the time. That's a crucial kind of activity, and we need to be taking care of that. And I've got some material about that, and I almost hate to say this because, oh my gosh, there's a lot of people in here. But by church especially, if you could do it, and if some of y'all are individuals, get in touch with me, but send me an email, and I'll send you the document that I have that's just whole church safety and security. It's like 200 pages, and I'll send you the PDF of it or a Word document, whatever you want, and I'll send that to you, and that you might find that useful. You might not, but you might. A lot of people have, obviously, and a lot of this material is in there, so don't hesitate to write me for it. And I'm not going to give you my email address. You just have to find out. No, I will. I'll give you my email address. I was kind of hoping I'm going to make it, rschrader at, kind of thing. So, talk and or walk through the plans. And I put plans in writing. Talk or walk through the plans. And then be willing to be viewed as a bit excessive. So let me go back to that because I kind of rushed through it. Assign the roles. Put the plans in writing, which doesn't have to be complicated, just a few steps. And then talk or walk through the plans. It's always worthwhile to do that. And then be willing to be viewed as a bit excessive. And in fact, I start every one of those meetings usually with, please, just trust me, I wouldn't do this just to cause you problems. I just want us to be safe and I want us to be more secure. Keep moving on. So, here's how you can have a leadership role. You can balance concerns with reason and logic and optimism. And I have met many people who are interested in security that are so negative, and they just view that there's just death around every corner pretty much, and they just view everybody in the church pretty much as a hired assassin. And you just can't live like that. And so, that makes people start ridiculing us after a while. So we want to be reasonable about things and use what's happening around the country as an example. Did you see this? And this happens to be a big concern of mine. Did you see in Pennsylvania the church bus crash a week and a half ago? And every single person was seriously injured, and about 5 of them are critically injured. And if you want to see that especially, go to the GoFundMe pages, and several of them have GoFundMe pages set up, and they'll probably never walk again. But it was a horrendous accident, but nobody was wearing a seat belt. And that usually is the case in church vans and church buses. And so we talk about, I always say this, we worry about what might happen to them in church, and then they go someplace and we don't worry about that, and they'll never be able to walk again the rest of their lives. Now, what's our balance here, and how we ought to be concerned about? Keep a dual focus on safety and security. Keep your entire place of worship in mind, the 5 Ps, and share information and examples and resources. And one of the best things you can do is sort of be the intelligence officer, get online, and just start putting in search terms and finding the things that are happening all over. And of course, there's a number of great websites that combine all of that together, and that can be really helpful. And then think and talk of safety and faith as perfectly achievable. It doesn't cost a lot of money. It doesn't require some gargantuan effort that we've never done before. It's just a matter of day in and day out, just like we are with our families, keeping a focus on what could go wrong and how can we keep that from going wrong. So let me give you some examples, and then I'll let you think about it for a second, and we'll talk about it. We just want to answer one question: what could go wrong? That's going to be the first question, is what could go wrong? So this table over here, since you all talked about it, we're not going to talk just about predators, the youth program and youth meetings. And so you don't have to scoot down, just your little group back there and your group and you two people back there. There's two of you, right? And you're not contributing much, so right now just go ahead and start contributing, so you can just do that. So that's the youth program. We'll take this one, is the finances, the money program, the offering, and then how we handle the offering and so forth. So again, you don't have to cluster together, just where you are at that table, talk about it. This one we're going to talk about Vacation Bible School. So just, or whatever we have, something for, how many of you, do you churches have something like that for young people in the summer? Something like that. Yeah. So let this table do that, just in your own little clusters. This one we're going to do a wedding. A wedding. So what could go wrong? So be thinking about, well, the whole thing could go wrong. Now that I think about it, that's kind of a bad example, isn't it? Let's just call all of those off. But no, seriously, a come together like a wedding or a funeral, a ceremonial thing. Now, what could go wrong with that? A revival service, and I'm using that term because that's what Southern Baptists say, but special church services of some kind that we might have, where there's a special speaker, or where we're going to have a special service of some kind. What could go wrong with that? So that will be this group here. And that one back there, let's make that one, let me think. What's a good event we could have them think about? Oh, a holiday, Easter or Christmas, something like, let's make it Easter. So Easter, you all get to have Christmas services. And this table over here will come up with, okay, I've gone through all the basics pretty much. What would be something that's different than some of those things that they could ask themselves, what could go wrong? Okay, we'll do the parking lot. Yeah, thank you. Who came up with that? I'll be doggone, you don't look that smart, and still, that's just amazing. That's one of his spiritual gifts. He's stupid, but he has occasionally good ideas. I know him, that's why I can say this. Okay, so the parking lot then. We'll have the parking lot and those kinds of things. So, and if I didn't give you one, just come up with one. But I want you to ask yourself in your group and really expand your thinking. We know about predators. We've already said that. What could go wrong with youth meetings, youth get-togethers, that kind of thing? What could go wrong in the Vacation Bible School or the kids group kind of a thing? And what could go wrong in the special events? And what could go wrong at the holidays? Just take a second and chat about that, and then I'm going to get back to you in a second. So you just go ahead and chat about that for a second. I'm so sorry, what? Oh, that's good. Thank you. Yeah, thanks. One time after a thing, I had 400 emails in the next 2 days, so it's kind of a good spin. I answered them all. No, when do you want me out of here? I'm here. Okay, about 2 more minutes. Okie dokie. If you've had a chance to talk about that, we'll just kind of turn around. Let's ask our Easter group, our Easter Christmas group. That's y'all, right? Is that you guys? The Easter Christmas group? All right. You're going to have an Easter program, or you're going to have the... Did we separate Easter and Christmas? Who's got Christmas? You guys do. I'm going to hit Christmas first. We're going to have a Christmas program. What could go wrong? Uh-huh. Everything. Yeah, that's true. That's true of all of our things, too. Yeah.
We want to make sure on that day that we have an open communication with our local authorities, fire rescue. We want to make sure that our doctors, who are members of our community and our church, are there and available. Registered nurses, we have a number of those. We want to make sure that they're seated in positions within the building where they can move quickly and make sure that our security safety team is there and available to provide crowd control and all that good stuff.
Yeah, you're right. It is pretty much. And what church are you all with?
The LDS Church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also
okay.
known as the Mormons.
Yes, also known as, yeah, right. We always have this long line of identification. Where are y'all located?
We're in this community right here in Golden.
Okay.
And Lakewood. We're all over the place.
Yeah.
On a typical Sunday, including Christmas Day, we could have up to 300 or 400 people attending.
Wow. So, yeah. So you end up, and much more than you're used to. I do want to mention this, and this is just as an aside, and it certainly doesn't apply to you all, but you mentioned about Grandma and Grandpa could fall, like I did. I found that offensive and distinctly unchristian. So I'm just, moving on from that. I'm going to pray against you. I just want you to know that. So. But that's exactly right. Look at the time of year we've got. In fact, one of the more severe accidents that I'm aware of is an older guy, an elderly man, who tripped on the rug that they had coming in the front door, fell, hit his head, hit his neck, and never recovered consciousness from that. And here's why that had been a problem. They didn't have enough rugs to take up all of the, people were walking in with mud and ice and all that stuff. And a couple of guys ran out and got the little rugs out of their trucks and just threw them down. But they didn't have enough grip for in there. And so when he hit it, it went right out from under him and he went sliding. And they were sued for an appreciable amount of money, but that wasn't the key. The key issue is that when it's inclement weather, we know some things can go wrong. And what are those things? So you're looking at that when it happens too. For example, I do a lot of work up in Minnesota in that area, and they keep their salt for the sidewalks. They keep it locked away because they used to have it sitting out, and little kids would get it and burn their mouths over and over. They had that happen like a dozen times before they finally figured out we probably better get this stuff put away and only adults have access to it. So yeah, Christmas can be a thing. Let me toss in one other thing. Insurance companies always say if they could stop church fires, they could give all of their employees bonuses, because that's where most of their money goes out to, is for church fires. And there are more church fires at Christmas celebrations than almost any place else, because Catholics are used to having candles. The rest of us don't know what to do with them for the most part. So I have said we ought to probably, if we could find people in the church that they wouldn't have to donate all of them, but just say, in honor of somebody, would you like to donate a dozen of those battery-operated candles to us, so that we could have candles to hold up in the air, but nobody's getting burned. They don't lay down on the upholstery and scorch it. You don't put it on a table outside, and it just happens over, and especially with children, it just happens over and over again. So I really try to keep everybody with the idea of let's try to use battery-operated candles when we can. So you've got the big picture of church security, church safety and security for Christmas right there. We'll come back to that because he's absolutely right. Every time we have a get-together, there are some similar things. Let's go to Easter.
You got several different things you can have. Well, every problem... All right. Hello. Every problem you have at a normal service, you can have kind of on steroids when there's much more people gathered. So you got medical emergencies, you got domestic issues that tend to flare up during holiday times, sometimes a little bit more than normal. What were some of the other
I'm
things
glad you mentioned that. That's a good idea to remember. Yeah, emotional things. They mentioned emotions too.
Yeah. And then you've got the obvious things that security teams are normally dealing with, but usually it tends to be, you can have medicals as far as a heart attack, or you can have accidents. Accidents are usually more frequent. What else do we talk about?
Inclement weather, Colorado springtime.
Yeah,
Blizzard.
springtime, the inclement weather that you already talked about, and the different things that we had a freeze. Our water pipes froze during a cold snap up in Evergreen, and nobody else knew how to deal with what do you do when there's water running out the water closet from the sprinkler system. So how do you shut the water off, or does the water control your domestic as well as your sprinkler system, or just figuring that out and dealing with that?
And sometimes you'd think, well, that's pretty obvious, but look at how many times at home where a hot water heater springs a leak or something, and for like the first 10 minutes, somebody's running around saying, well, what should we do? Should we turn it off here? Should we just put a bucket and collect this? What's the things we're supposed to do? It's amazing how when something's happening, you can forget what you're supposed to do, unless it's written down on something. I like to see on anything in a church to have instructions for turning it off and turning it on, just put right on the front of the thing, so that at least we have an idea about it, and safety issues and so forth too. There's a group at the back of yours that was an Easter group as well. Did you all have some thoughts? It would be surprising if they did, but I wanted to give them a chance.
We have a pretty large congregation. We're at St. Joan of Arc Church, and at Easter time we'll have a parking lot service, and we'll have as many as 800 people in the parking lot.
800 people in the parking lot?
Yeah. So
Wow.
so we have a situation of traffic control. That's usually a pretty big thing, because we'll have multiple services, and one of the service is a sunrise. And within about an hour and a half, we have a second service. So we've got traffic coming in and out, running into each other. Matter of fact, we had an issue this past Easter where one car ran into another one coming out. And that's kind of a big thing. Obviously, just controlling, being able to control the separating people in the parking lot where everybody is getting ready to worship. That's just a couple of things that we had. And
Well, in California, 5 years ago, in an Easter service, a guy was unfamiliar with the parking lot, and and probably nervous about the crowds and stuff, hit the accelerator instead of the brake, or hit the accelerator while the car was in drive anyway, ended up hitting and killing 2 children in the parking lot. And so the thing that Easter and Christmas have in common is, more than any other time, there will be total strangers there. Never been there before, maybe even never even been in a church service before, and don't know anything about the parking lot or anything. And so it creates just such a tremendous safety issue. How many of you all have somebody watching the parking lots anyway, just pretty much every main service? I think that has tremendous value. In Minnesota, they always say, well, that's not always a very fun task to watch the parking lots. And that's why certainly we need people out there some, but there is some real value to having at least security cameras and so forth, so we can monitor the parking lots, if nothing else. How many of you all remember when we said security camera and monitor, it would be thousands of dollars to make that happen? And now you can get little security cameras and watch it on your phone from home. And so there's a lot of those things much more possible now than ever were before. Did I interrupt you when you were in the middle of something? It doesn't matter. I just was asking. I just wanted to know. I wasn't going to change anything. I just kind of wanted to know. What did you have here for your youth people, for your youth groups? Oh, down to that end? Okay. Okay, yeah. What about your group down there? What were you thinking about it with the youth program?
Well, I'm actually the youth pastor at our church. One of the things I constantly have to mitigate is just general reckless behavior, where they can injure themselves or injure somebody that they're with. Property damage can possibly incur another bodily harm, of course. We've had issues where we just... Are they harming each other? Assault from another student, or substances being brought on property, or even the idea of guardians. Are the right guardians picking them up? Is there somebody out in the parking lot when they're coming on or off property? Were a few of the things that came up.
Yeah. How do you know that that's happening?
Which? All of it?
Which? Any of those things. The problems between the youth themselves, how are you able to be quickly aware of that?
The learning the hard way was finding out after the fact. But as a result of, like, let's say the assault, we installed some bubble mirrors in the walls and the ceilings to eliminate some blind spots where things had happened. Awareness of, okay, we're not going to have the entire church available to us. We're going to stay a little more centralized. It's easier to have eyes on the students that way, less likely for something to happen if they're being monitored by an adult.
You know, it's interesting. Youth programs have the same thing in common, of course, as the whole church, but especially youth programs. We want to bring in young people that are perhaps having problems and that need to have the benefit of the faith that you're sharing. But often, isn't that ironic, they come in and they bring other people down to their level rather than the other kids bringing them up to their level. I see that so often. And, you know, for those of you all, I don't like to use the term, and some of you know this, it just happens to be a thing with me semantically, but I'm not crazy about the concept of a sheepdog, because that sort of implies that the rest of us are just a bunch of dumb sheep and we really ought to just let you guide us where you want us to go. But I understand the concept. But if we're going to be thinking about that concept, then we have to say we're probably the only flock of sheep in the world where we invite the wolf in and we're happy to have him there. And if they don't just kill us the first time, we'll invite them back again because we're just so happy to have them there. And we always need to be aware. I'm keenly aware, and this is a little digressing from you, but I just want to take advantage of it. Keenly aware of people who, they come to our place of worship, they make a profession of some kind, or they make a commitment, or they seem to be really involved, and then they want to start volunteering and volunteering and volunteering. We need to give sort of a time, a testing time for us to make judgments about whether people should be participating in this program, and this program, because we don't know them well enough to make those decisions. And a profession or a commitment can go away really quick when there's temptation there. And so I like for us to be thinking all the time about who are we opening our young people up to, and what are they doing, as you say, harm to each other even, for that matter. Did you want to add something else now? Or is that just your way of getting out of having anything to say?
I tried to reason a lot of it, but it didn't work.
Oh, yeah, okay. Now, there's the gentleman, Claire at the very back. Before you go ahead and take yours. Hold that. Did you guys discuss something back there? Well, at least he's honest. He says no. Okay, come up here and give it back to him. We're going to pray for him separately, so just keep him in mind. Before you leave, we're all going to gather around you. Okay, what was it you all were thinking?
Well, in kids ministry, you've got two different sections. You've got the teenagers, like what he's talking about, and then you've got the younger kids, which you tag them and you bag them and you try to keep them all in order. But there's a whole communication thing. I mean, at our church, all of our leaders in our kids ministry have got walkie-talkies, and our safety team we're all on the same channel. We all wear the little ear things, but what our concern is, if something happens in one room, how do we segregate and lock that room down and keep everybody else safe at the same time? That's our biggest challenge.
And a difficult one, and it varies from church to church too, what your layout is and how you can do it, but isn't that necessary to so?
Well, we're doing
what would we
construction.
do?
We're building a whole new church now, so that whole thing is just
Oh my goodness, what church are you part of?
Cornerstone and Boulder.
Oh my goodness, yeah, you are going to be building a whole big church, aren't you?
Yeah.
We're going to be taking up offerings for them in a little bit later too, so.
That's good.
Well, he's right. The small children, the nursery component, and the teenagers are all different issues. And think about your church. When we're doing these things and when we're talking about these things, I hope you're putting in your mind, oh yeah, let's, when we get back, spend some time talking about Thanksgiving's coming up, Christmas is coming up. What are we going to do? Are we going to do that little Halloween thing we used to do? And for all of that, be thinking, what can go wrong? And what can we do to keep it from going wrong? And then how are we going to respond? And how will we know what's happening? I mean, those are things to apply to our own, because everybody has a different situation. In fact, I wanted to ask you, how many of you all are in a church that is larger than 500 members? It's a lot. Anybody here? I've got your hand. I saw your hand up, sir. I'll grab you. Do you need to just go to the bathroom or something? Yeah, no. Well, it's not. Hold it. So what about over 600? Geez, we have some big churches. What do you think's the biggest church represented here then? Anybody here like 1,000?
Is Flatirons here?
Yeah, I was going to ask if Flatirons was here, but they're not. What about 800? What church are you part of? What is it? Plum Creek has that many. About 1,000. Anybody over that? Well, how many do you all have? 1,700. What church is that? I'm sorry, say it again. Oh, Faith Bible Chapel, that would. Okay, how many of you all have under 100? What church is that? How many? About 200. Anybody less than that? What about you, sir? 25. Well, could he have exactly the same problems any of us have? 100%. Yeah, there's nothing, and in fact, sometimes more so, because you're attracting in people and a building, and the building of the church is as controversial and problematic as almost anything. Where are you meeting? Oh, how very nice. And you're just sort of starting in there then, huh? There was a... Have you ever thought you might be the cause of that? I'm just mentioning it. Just mentioning it. Just a thought, you know. Well, that's interesting for us to think about, because those are different resources. I spoke in Lamar, Colorado not long ago. Well, it's been several years ago, but I commented the next day. I drove around the night before looking at the churches and stuff. And so the next day I said, hey, is somebody here a member of the Foursquare Gospel Church? I'd like to talk to them afterwards. And so he came over and I said, I drove by your place last night. There are no lights on outside. There's light fixtures, but no light bulbs. And it is so dark in the parking lot. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. It was just so dark. And so I said, you really need to work on that. And he said, well, now, this is a good humbling experience for you, Tina. He said, we can barely afford to turn the electricity on to have people in the building. We don't turn the heat on until it's so cold that nobody can stand it. We have no air conditioner. We don't run appliances because we couldn't run our church if we had to pay electricity. So we're not going to be able to have lights. And that was a humbling experience for me. Now, my general feeling is maybe you ought to combine with some other church or something if that's the case. But nevertheless, some places don't have resources. And even the biggest church, as some of you all know, the resources go real quick, don't they? And especially when people are looking online and we say, make sure you give. How many of you all had a big drop in giving when there was not the in-person kind of thing? So I know that can be an issue. Now, I don't want us to be too late about this, so let me just what was your group back there? What were you all talking about besides the Broncos? You didn't get an assignment? Well, he who is last shall be first. I should have called on you right away, shouldn't I? Yeah, you have to stay after, yeah. Yeah, we'll come back to you later then. What did your group have here? Finances, okay. What can go wrong? And when does it go wrong?
Money can't get from the plate. Money getting from the offertory plate to actually into the bank.
Yes, that's always and then once it gets to the bank, does the person responsible for it, are they taking care of it in the right way? Both of those things have been problems. I was reading an article about a woman in, it's happened dozens of times, but they didn't know that they were short over $150,000 until they asked her to take it out for their building fund. Because every time they'd ask her for a report, she'd give it to them, and it was just fine. Because she was just making up the report. And my feeling about that is, and of course then the members of the community came together and replaced that money. And the pastor said, the Lord was looking out for us because everybody gave us this money again. They should have been looking out for the money the Lord gave them and make sure it doesn't get stolen out of the bank in the first place. That was just so foolish to let that even happen. So yeah, from the time, I've got a picture, I wish you could see it. Sometime look it up online, maybe you'll see it online. About a guy back in, I don't know, it was New York or something, and he was disabled, and so he volunteered to watch the money baskets as they'd bring them back until they were able to come back and finally get them and take them into the money counting room. And they have him because they started noticing how their money was just, their offerings were going down tremendously. And they finally put a camera on him. And when he would get the baskets, he would start just taking cash out, and putting it in his pocket and taking it out. And once they arrested him, everybody gave a lot more money, I guess, because they said their offerings went up tremendously. What a shame that that happened, because he was a well-respected person. But when it comes to money, nobody ought to have complete access to it without several witnesses somewhere along the line. So that's always going to be an issue. What did your group have here? Oh, you had the Vacation Bible School kind of thing. Would you say that's pretty similar to having any of the issues where we have a lot of kids coming in, that general thing? Have you had any issues related to Vacation Bible School?
Larger influx, a lot of kids that aren't normally part of the church, so there's new faces, new families. Obviously, one of the big things they talked about here is having a registration, so you know who's authorized to pick up, who's emergency contacts, but also SOPs in place that say, not having an adult and child or two teenagers off alone together somewhere, making sure those kind of things are in place if something happens, what to do.
Yeah.
Because it is a lot more volatile because it's all day, and what areas are you securing?
I like the idea about, I think most churches are doing this nowadays, about you don't just release a child to just anybody that comes up. I think there's some sort of sign in or sign out in almost every church, and really valuable. And I went to Falls Creek Summer Camp in Oklahoma as a teenager. And so I wrote to my mother. I wrote everything to my mother. And I told her that there was a prayer garden and that a lot of the kids would go to the prayer garden at night. And I got back a response the next day. So she must have gotten it and ran to the post office and put it in. And it said, she said, Tina, when people ask you to go to the prayer garden, they're not asking you to go to pray. They're asking for something else. Don't you be going to the prayer garden with no boys. So I didn't go to the prayer garden after that. So, so I've always, how many of us have joked about all the things that go on, but nevertheless, sometimes we have to, for their own best interest, watch about what young people are involved with. And you had, what? Weddings? Or did you all have the Vacation Bible School too? Weddings. What about weddings?
So probably the biggest issue would be some sort of medical issue because people's emotions are very high for both either a wedding or a funeral. So being able to react to that and then having a lot of people in the building that are unfamiliar with the building because it's their first time there. So trying to have some sort of a plan how you can contact the people in the building and then as well as emergency services.
And one of the other things with weddings, I'm just going to mention to you, is purses get left in back rooms while people are changing clothes and all of that. And they're just amazing how if you have criminal intent, you can find a place to commit a crime, can't you? And so often at a wedding, we don't have security people at a wedding. You know, our security team doesn't show up for everything. That's why we need a security liaison. So that there isn't a wedding, that there isn't somebody there that is responsible for the security of the purses and the people and who to notify and how to get immediate response. I want you to be thinking about that, is that if you feel like you have a pretty good control over what's going on in the main services, who has it when it's not a main service? That is such a crucial thing to think about. And the weddings and the funerals are both those, emotions and illnesses and reactions to things, but property, cars in the parking lot being broken into and so forth. We just always need to be aware of that. And I'm skipping, I know, just because I don't want us to go over time. Who had something else to over here that I forgot about? What did you all have? Oh, that's right. You had your hand up, didn't you? Oh, I'm so happy. Yeah, yes. Have you already gone? I mean, that's my big concern. Okay, go ahead.
You talked about the whole security team having radios. My question to him would be, do the classrooms for your youth also have radios that the teachers know how to use so that if there is a problem, they can contact the security team? Yes. Good for you. Well done. That's it.
That was all? And you've been standing there with your hands up for all this time for that question? Yeah. Well, you know, I was in a Catholic church in Denver not long ago, and they spent all kinds of money for an expensive, very expensive communication system within the school and the church. And they're so frustrated because the learning curve for learning how to use it is so difficult. It's very difficult to know how to use. And they finally set up a plan. Now, I know this will sound ludicrous, and they're going to change it, but it was so foolish that I couldn't believe it. If you need help, you call him, and he'll verify whether you really need help or not, and then he will get help. That's just the way it goes. So they said, well, we were just having so many people not knowing how to use it, and they were hitting the alarm. And so we decided, have them call one central place, and then that person could verify it was valid. I said, well, now you've just defeated the whole purpose of having all of that expensive equipment in every classroom. So they were working on that right now to get it done. Doesn't that show you, though, technical issues are one thing, people issues are another thing. And we need to be thinking about people issues because we have a lot of different people that need to be using the equipment that we're using or relying on the equipment we're using. And I had something else over here. What was it you all had over here? I can't remember. What was it?
Parking lots.
What was it?
Parking lots. The parking lot?
Oh, parking lots. I thought you said party nights, and I thought, what church is doing that? I said, church I want to join, but I just had never heard of that before. I really did think you said party nights, and I thought, that's pretty cool. All right, parking lots, okay.
So, I mean, we can have a lot of a lot of issues in our parking lots. We've had cars broken into in our parking lots. We have a church that's catty corner from our campus. They have an average of 5 to 7 cars every Sunday that's broken into on their lots. You can have medical issues. You can have domestic spillovers into your parking lots. Kids getting hit by cars, traffic accidents, any number of things. The biggest deterrent to anything in your parking lot is just having presence in your lots.
Is what, sir?
Having a presence in your lot. You know, increase the presence in your parking lot, and you're gonna stop a lot of these issues.
Yeah.
Make sure whoever you have out there, though, you have some sort of verbal de-escalation. A lot of the stuff we've dealt with in our lot is that domestic spillover, the arguments that escalate, things like that. Doesn't always need a heavy hand. You know, we de-escalate it, we get people separated, move them along on their way, things like that. But you can have medical incidents, people can collapse, people trip and fall, things like that. So make sure, like you said, capabilities and the willingness to do those things are a big issue. Don't put somebody in the parking lot that doesn't have the capability to help, either verbal de-escalation or medical.
Well, one of the things we say about parking lots is if we're really concerned about the interior of the building, nobody that ever did any harm in the interior of the building didn't have to go out, start in the parking lot at somewhere. So parking lots are a key issue, and I'm surprised that we're not putting more focus on that for a whole wide range of reasons. So that's part of, this people, property, places kind of thing. I'm going to zip through these again when we think about what we want to be doing to be talking and responding to it. Is to, once again, go back to this leadership role we were talking about as doable, and that takes us to the end of it. But let me say this right here at the very closing part of it. I'm just sort of doing this little brief introduction thing. I was so thrilled when I saw what you have as your agenda today, because it covers a wide range of things. But here's why I think it's so important to cover a wide range of things. If you're focused on the what we might consider the little things, we'll take care of some of the bigger things. When we can think some about some of the bigger things, it reminds us of some of the littler things. And one of the issues that's so important for us, if we really want to have a leadership role in safety and security, is to keep that whole big picture thing all the time. And when we're talking with people, talk them down from focusing only on active shooters. And if they never even think that's going to be an issue and they're only focused on this, expand their thinking up to active shooters. That's our role, is to keep everybody thinking of that bigger picture. So I was just told a while ago that they're going to put a PDF link on the website. So you don't have to write to me personally. And in fact, I'm directing you right now, do not do that. I'll get a restraining order against all of you. But that way it'll just save some time and energy for you too. You can just click the link and you can get it that way. So it's nice to have you here. I know you're going to get a lot out of today. I think the sheriff he's my favorite sheriff, seriously. So I think he's going to do just a great job of bringing this together just as you want it to. And I'll be in touch with you, and you can always contact me for anything if you ever want to, okay? So you keep the faith. I'll be in touch.